morning, everyone. So I was asked to talk about risk. And the lines on risk for an audience like this are obvious, aren't they? The greatest risk for government is that we don't innovate, that we fail to do the change that will enable us to answer those really big questions that I know Alex started the day with yesterday. How do we think about climate change, changing technology, challenges in public finance? Innovation is necessary to solve all of those problems. How can you be so risk averse? It is obvious that risk is required and that the greatest risk is not to innovate. Those are the obvious lines. When we stand up and we deliver speeches, we all know that. But it doesn't always feel like that on the ground. When you're considering taking a risk, doing something new, that permission doesn't always filter down. If you try something new, well, there's a risk that people might not think it's a good idea. There's a risk that you might do it, and then it doesn't work, and that looks bad. There's a risk that you might do it, it works, but not quite well enough, and it never really gets scaled up. And when you look back on it, you kind of think that was a bit of a distraction. There's a risk that it's a good idea, you do it, you scale it up, but you find that your colleagues have had their jobs, career structures, and lives completely changed by it. And that feels pretty worrying as well. And when you gather a lot of public sector leaders to talk about this problem, we have a great tendency to kind of look at ourselves and say, this risk aversion, this is a problem in the public sector. And absolutely not. This is not a public sector problem. This is a human problem. The evidence that people are risk averse is overwhelming. And indeed, we know that people aren't just risk averse, they're particularly loss averse. They like the things that they have, and they don't want to lose them. And we know that innovation often means change and taking away some of what you hold today. So that kind of risk aversion and loss aversion that can make innovation difficult on the ground isn't just an attribute of the public sector, it's an attribute of all of us as people. But even more than that, when you start putting people into large organizations, the attitude towards risk is not helped. So you will all know that if you're running a private company, let's imagine you're running a large company, you're the CEO. The rational thing to do is to take risk, because of course your investors want you to take risk. They've got balanced portfolios across the market. And indeed, as you look at, let's say you've got a coin, and it turns just slightly more often to heads, just slightly. And in front of you, you're offered 1,000 double or quits bets with your slightly lucky coin. I'm the CEO. I want the organization to take all 1,000 of those bets, because each one of those double or quits, when they're added up, will put my company in a stronger position. But each of those double or quits bets, all 1,000 of them across my corporation that I'm imagining myself in here, each one of those is owned by an individual who has to make a decision. And double or quits doesn't always look so great there. I mean, double, that's pretty good. Like, maybe there's a promotion in that for me if I double. But quits, that's definitely like your job on the line. For some of us, that's like our house, maybe our identity. Quits is really not so great when you're looking at an individual risk. So we know that risk appetite, when you put lots and lots of risks into a big organization, even if everybody is acting rationally and sensibly, Even if you're operating in a completely profit-oriented environment, that one that we think is so great for innovation, look at those brilliant private sector innovators, what we know is that people take fewer risks because the structure of the organization doesn't reward them for it, and that leaves real money on the table. Now, if you think about that and the scale of that challenge for large private sector companies, now you're taking that into the public sector, and we've got a bit of an additional challenge, right? Because our CEO is looking at those 1,000 double or quits bets, and suddenly taking all 1,000 doesn't look so good. Because the punishment for some of the quits will be really high. And it probably should be, because some of those might be endangering vital public services. So we're taking what is already a structural human problem, layering on another challenge from operating in a big organization, and then we're layering on another structural challenge of operating in an environment where what you do makes the biggest difference. So we should not be surprised, and we should not be self-critical that we find ourselves operating in cultures that are risk-averse. It's not because we've sort of missed a trick or are doing something wrong or are a bit dim. It's deep and structural in what we do. And when you have a challenge like that, hope is definitely not a strategy. You need to do things to change the way people think about risk. And I don't think, by the way, that anybody globally has kind of got this recipe fully right. But I thought I'd share some thoughts with you today about how I think about some of the things that we all collectively need to do to try to work on risk as an enabler of innovation. And the first is getting really good at defining our innovation space. And the reason why this really kind of calls to me personally is a long time ago, I had the privilege of working for a short period in the head office of one of the really large oil majors. And I remember a senior manager walking past my desk and going out of his way to tell me to pick my coat up off the floor because it was a health and safety hazard. Because that was a culture built for an organization that operates really serious, dangerous machinery offshore. So you better have a health and safety culture. But that health and safety culture permeated right through the organization down to whether I was allowed to leave my coat on the floor. And the same thing happens in government. We're right to be risk averse about a huge amount of what we do. We are literally dealing with people's lives and people's livelihoods, and we need to take care of that. But the problem is, once you set up a culture that is careful, a culture that cares about clearance and process, that culture starts to spread into the rest of your organization. And we have wonderful guidance here in the UK. The Orange Book tells us about how we should think about our risk appetite, tells us we should define areas where we have a low risk appetite, areas where we should have a high risk appetite. And I'm here to say I don't think that is good enough. Because if you operate in a world in which so much of what you do needs to be thoughtful and careful, if you want people to break out of that, you need to do more than just kind of write that down as a policy. You need to really give them an enabling space that lets them do things that are different. We know that, and we do it brilliantly in lots of our policy work. Here in this country, but right around the world, you can see regulators using sandbox structures to enable new kinds of change, whether that's a sandbox for regulating drones, or a sandbox for regulating engineering biology, a sandbox for new forms of digital identity work. All of that is happening here and now. And if you are a manager or a leader, you are in some ways a bit like a regulator. You help make the rules. And everyone who finds themselves in a rule-making role, be that formal or informal, should be asking themselves the question, in my view, where is my sandbox, and where am I giving people not just permission, but explicit encouragement and reward to really make change happen. The second thought, and let's go back to our CEO who's looking at her 1,000 bets. The second thought is I think we can do more to seek out and build portfolios of innovation. When it comes to being an innovator, there really is safety in numbers. Because one project feels like a pretty big failure risk. When you start to look at 10 projects or 100 projects, and you see the ones that go well, the ones that go okay, the ones that go badly, the portfolio as a whole looks much more attractive. And that deals with your financial worries. It even deals with some of your political worries, actually, because it gives people a way to talk about innovation. And the thing that really brings this home to me is the work that we did during COVID on buying vaccines, where we were taking very risky decisions about spending really significant amounts of public money on products that had an uncertain payoff. And a huge amount of why that was actually relatively straightforward was because we were able to look at it as a portfolio. We knew some would work better, some would work worse, but the project as a whole had a fantastic payoff. So we need to do more to seek out and bring together innovations in the way that we examine them, structure them, talk about them, to create strong portfolios that give people, frankly, the protection that comes from being part of a bigger picture. But thirdly, of course, we need to go back to the individual. That's where I started it. How does it feel to be an innovator? Are you going to be rewarded or punished? And there are some kind of easy, dare I say maybe even cheap, responses here. We definitely should be celebrating individuals and teams who innovate. We should definitely also be talking more and more positively about failure and the learnings from it. But we should go further than that as well. And if you really want to change that individual calculus of gain and loss, you need to do some bigger things. You need to make sure that where innovation is happening, where change is happening, we are scaling it up. We are increasing the rewards to innovation because when we see it and spot it, we immediately act on it and take it to the largest scale possible. That is an incredible privilege that those of us working in government have. We can scale, not just in our own organizations, not just across the public sector here in the UK, but across the public sector globally. How do we do more to increase the rewards from innovation by scaling up what works? But at the same time, working on the other side of the coin, yes, talking about failure, learning from failure, that's important. But the other thing I think we can do even more of is ensuring that we iterate from failure. And we all know, and kind of every textbook will tell you, that the first car is always worse than a horse. The first time we try something new, it doesn't usually outcompete the old solution. It's only through iteration and change that over time we get to a better answer. So please, it's not just about talking about failure, embracing or celebrating failure. It's about really actively learning from and iterating when things don't work, so that the innovators themselves see a bigger reward from success, but a bigger reward from failure as well. And I think that's really achievable. So I think this problem is hard. I think that's one of the real messages I want to leave you with today. We have to really work at dealing with this quite deep, serious and structural and legitimate and rational risk aversion in much of what we do. Hope might not be a strategy, but we know, as we look around incredible innovators in this room and beyond, that enabling people and empowering people to have brilliant ideas, to see them and to scale them up really is. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in action over all of the events today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think hope is not a strategy could be the subline for Innovation 2024. I really like that. But the points I took away there, risk aversion not being a public sector issue, and I think sometimes we're criticized for that. And actually, I love the way you framed it there. This is a human problem, risk aversion, loss aversion, but actually, quite understandably why in the public sector we are careful and we are cautious, because the things we do affect people's lives directly. But some of these solutions you've put in there, really looking at our culture, creating enabling spaces to experiment, the leadership key on that, giving permission to people to try new things and not punishing them if they fail, but learning from those and building that portfolio of innovation and risks. And then finally, celebrating innovation, whether it's in individuals and teams. Great place to start off today and set the scene for the conversations that will come throughout the day. And now I'd like to introduce the second speaker for this morning, and that's Rohan Malik, who is the Managing Partner for Government and Infrastructure at EY UK and Ireland. Over to you, Rohan.
Thank you, Siobhan. And Sarah, I learn much from you whenever I hear you speak, but you always raise the bar as well. So it's really, really hard to come after you, but I will give it my best shot. So good morning, everyone, and on behalf of EY, fantastic day two beckons as well. So I'll spend a few minutes right now on a few things. But yesterday, just to think about, it was a global event. We had 4,000 attendees registered from 70 countries. Some would say it was a mini Davos in the UK, in London. Now, when I have a global event like the one we had yesterday, it makes me wonder, makes me reflect, what does it mean to be British in this context? You're in my home city, so what does it mean to be British? So here's what my typical day looks like. I drive into work in my German car, electric, not diesel. I pick up a French baguette on the way. My lunch typically is Spanish tapas. Post-work, I often go to an Irish pub and have Belgian beer. And post that, I pick up a cheeky Indian takeaway with some Argentinian Malbec wine, and I sit on my Swedish sofa, and I watch on my Japanese TV an American TV series. So being British for me means being global, right? So thank you for giving us the opportunity to come to London and have a mini Davos for government here in our home city. Now, on a serious note, two reflections from yesterday. One on IQ, other one on EQ. So the first one on IQ. So hopefully you'll see on the slide some of the biggest companies in the world, right? So what do they have in common? Yes, they're all US companies, all American companies. Yes, they are big brands, and in fact, many of us are customers, consumers of those companies. Yeah, they are tech companies, right? But why are they so valuable? Look at the market cap on these companies right now. And the answer is actually quite simple. It's data. Over the last few years, these companies have acquired, lawfully, all the data from us, the consumers. They have polished it, harnessed it, and now they are delivering bespoke services, customized services, on demand, and they, in fact, deliver sometimes even before we know we have a need. So data is what has made them extremely valuable. And data is huge. If you think about the data which currently exists, if you wanted to download data from the internet today, it would take us 181 million years. 181 million years to download all the data from the internet. But who's the mothership of all the data? Which organization is more valuable than a Google or an Amazon when it comes to data? And that's what you see over here. It's you. It's the government. The organizations which hopefully have secure data for the citizens right now at their fingertips. Now, the technology is the easy part. So we spent a lot of time yesterday, and in fact today also, we'll spend time on AI. And rightly so, AI is a great tool. But today, the data, imagine if the data were to be harnessed, where you have a single version of the citizen from across all the silos which exist today in government, right from birth to, dare I say, death. Data which is shared freely between governments, education, healthcare, social security, taxation, employment, to provide those bespoke services to citizens. Cheaper, faster, better. World-class public service. The technology is the easy part. Yes, we have to harness AI, and we will do so. What's difficult is trust. Do citizens have trust with the government around them using data safely, securely? Do we have the consent of the citizens around using that data? For me, that is the big question. That is indeed the big question around the IQ dimension, that data is the new water. I hate the word oil. We are now in a sustainable world. So data is the new water, but how do we build trust with that data to be able to truly exploit the full potential? My second EQ reflection from yesterday is about the future of digital is human. And that's what you see here on the slide right now. And it feels like an oxymoron. The future of digital is human. So why do I say that? So 50 years back, the Fortune 500 companies, when you looked at what derives value, 80% of that was fixed assets, inventory, stocks, buildings. Cut forward to 50% now, it's intangibles. It's intellectual property. It's trust in brand and its data. We did some research with Oxford University. We looked at 1,000 executives from 25 countries who were all leading big digital programs in the government and in the private sector. And what was a revelation for some others was obvious, was that those transformation programs which put humans in the center as the actual end objective, being citizens or employees, were 3 times more successful than those which did not. So, if you think about the human dimension of digital, 1, external, citizens, 2nd, internal, employees. Many of you in the room who are civil servants right now, and often that is forgotten. So my EQ reflection really is, the future of digital is human. And think through, when you are embarking upon the AI journey, about the impact it can have and the potential it's got to benefit not just citizens, but also employees in this context. And for me, when I look at end of day to day, it's all about making new connections. So IQ, think about the trust element when it comes to data, and EQ, think about the human dimension, in fact, around the future of digital. I will go back today, Siobhan, and I will go back to my Indian takeaway, sit on my Swedish sofa, and I will finish off my American TV series. So thank you very much, have a great day, and wish you all the very best. Bye-bye.